Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Astrology Victoria and ANN Archetypal News Network. Today, we will be talking about the astrology of this coming week, starting today, September 19th, all the way through Sunday, the 25th. And so, with no further ado, I will start my share. There we are, starting today in a continuation, of course, of last week. If you did not see the video, it's always great to see the previous video so you know how the energies keep going and going. We are still under this influence of the Venus square Mars, where there might be desires to do a lot of stuff and then have a difficulty with dealing with self-care or our needs or what we really want, our desire. And there could be tensions also in relationships where maybe just arguments just ensue for the sake of argument. And it might be like tensions between people. It's not necessarily romantic relationships, but just relationships in general. Or like I said before, maybe we want to do a lot and then we don't know how to hold back and maybe just enjoy um, a little bit of too much yang and this dynamic where finding a healthy balance between doing and then resting is important. So this is still this week will be a little bit prevalent still this week. And we also have, like we said the other day, this Venus Uranus trine, which promotes getting a little bit crazy, a little bit unconventional, like maybe you might even meet people that are completely different from the norm or what you would think is the norm, or you might be even thinking about different kinds of relationships. This is a very supported aspect for really getting a little bit weird with your friends or even with your own personal style. Like every time this comes around, there's this like, I just want to be quirky. Let's change my whole wardrobe into these really fun, different things that I want to wear, or change my hair or something like that. Or these urges to just be different and express beauty in a different way. Or again, in relationships, this is the time where I don't know, the hippie friend, and I'm not being despective here, I'm meaning like just somebody that is completely different from, let's say, the norm or the most people, comes along and then just sweeps you off your feet and brings a very different approach to relationship. This is also an aspect that can be supporting a desire to be more open in relationships, maybe experiment a little bit with relationships, especially because Mars is in Gemini and we have that square to Venus at the same time. There might be a desire to just go and experiment maybe different ways of doing relationships, or even wanting or desiring to experiment love with other people. This is kind of a supportive aspect for polyamorous relationships. And what that means, does it mean that it is a bad thing? Not really. It's more like, what is that desire to be more free in relationships and not so constrained? So that could be one way of looking at this Venus Uranus, and it could be more prevalent definitely for the earth signs, because it will be in this like nice trine. So it's like a desire also to make changes and to free oneself from the status quo of the way we do relationships. So you might be considering different things, or associating with people that are just not what you used to. And then that could bring enormous benefits for you to feel that you can express in a very different way that you're not used to. So it's a good time for experimentation, if you ask me. Why not? As long as things are healthy and you are staying really grounded, which is a little bit the next part that I'll be talking about this week, especially if you come with that like new person that enters your life, sweeps you off, you're off in the clouds, and then you're not really measuring, the consequences of such liberating acts, So it's very important to always stay very, very grounded. What else is happening here? Well, we do have the square Saturn Uranus that is tightening and tightening, and it will get tighter. We have been talking about this. And again, is this desire to liberate oneself. There's going to be feelings maybe of being even more contracted in your existence by society, by norms, by bosses, and the need to break free from that. Literally, this is a time of immense changes, as we also have Pluto trining the sun. So, Virgo people, especially Virgo people, or anybody with anything around the 26th degree uh, of either the earth signs. This means this is a very supportive time for changes. It's time to let go of things, structure, beliefs, people, relationships, because this supportive aspect of Venus to Uranus here also supports that. Maybe this is the time to separate from something that's no longer really working. And that's why the energy, it's really promoting experimentation, it's promoting diversity, it's promoting freedom. And of course, Saturn here with whatever is going on around you might put those breaks. However, this week, the breaks by Saturn are not necessarily like bad or like, you're getting to do something and it just doesn't work. No. What's happening here is that Saturn is also trining Mars. It will start trining Mars this week. And as that happens, we can have more endurance. So for the things that we're doing, we we can do things a little bit more slow and steady, more like focus. Saturn helps us to focus the energy. So if we're still like really crazy doing a million different things, Saturn trining Mars will almost say like, okay, now time to focus onto something, like take it slowly. Let's not rush into things because then boom, crash, right? And I gotta tell you a little story about this. Yesterday, I was in a little bit of a turmoil in the morning, and then I go out with my car, and I don't know, I was in such a rush without really paying attention, and I bumped into somebody's car. And I was like, oh my gosh, slow down, slow down the speed, because this is what happens. Nothing bad happened. And that's why sometimes, like when we have trines, maybe it's not that bad. It's just a little of a wake up call, like, hey, slow down, slow down. So nothing really happened. It was just a little scratch. And I was able to tell the person that was in the car, I am so sorry. What can I do? It went well, so no problem. But this is just a little illustration of what happens when the energy is too scattered and we're a little bit restless, and our minds are maybe not completely fully present. And this can also happen because, well, Neptune is playing a really big role this whole time. And we're going to talk about what Neptune's doing, because our dear friend Neptune, throughout the week, and we know with that Neptune had been also opposing the sun last week, where we talked about maybe a feeling of either confusion or boundaries being a little bit blurred, or not having a clear direction or focus, and or being again very scattered and not knowing really where we stand. These are again especially true for Virgos or Geminis or Sagittarius people that are having Neptune either opposing or squaring planets uh, in your chart, if that's the case, where there could be a sense where you just really don't know where to stand or where you begin and where the other things end. Could feel very emotional as well. For me, I know that it's been a very emotional time. And yes, I have been feeling very, very connected to everything. And it's like, okay, I am experiencing this Neptune transit on my sun, not in a negative way. And I'm going to tell you why my experience, because maybe that relates to your experience, especially if you're a Virgo, Sagittarius, Gemini, and you're having Neptune uh, strongly on your psyche. There is a sense of wanting to be in literally alternate, like different realities. It's like wanting to see the best in everything, connect to everything. However, it's a, how can I put it? Let's say I got another little anecdote. I was changing my oil, and the guy on the till, I go up to this guy, and I see he has a tattoo, and I ask him, do you mind sharing about this tattoo? And then he starts sharing about how important that is, and it was a transformer, and how his mom gave him the wrong transformer, and that was so meaningful for him because it reminded him of his mom, and blah blah blah. And then I just kind of connected to this person's story and history, and I just felt so connected. And then he told me, thank you for asking, you just made my day. So this is when these boundaries between self and other start blurring. I have been feeling extremely emotional around people, around situations. I wake up and I just kind of want to cry, and I feel into things, and sometimes I feel super elated and connected, and other times I feel a deep sadness, and it's like, what is going on? What is going on? So this is my experience with Neptune. So if you have a similar experience with Neptune, I would love to hear your comments. It is also a beautiful time for spiritual pursuits. And we already know that all these planets in retrograde, dun 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 dun, retrograde, retrograde, retrograde means we are looking within, we are changing within, we are restructuring things within our own self, our own beings. We're asking those questions, or even going back to tie loose ends, finish things. The other thing that again happened to me this week, and as the Mercury Mercury Jupiter was really strong. Um, well, the thing is that over promising can be really an issue, or saying things if you cannot follow through, do not promise things. I I, for example, say, yes, I will call you back in 10 minutes, and I forget to call you back in 10 minutes. I know this is a simple thing, but because of that, I lost a potential client because I kept kind of pushing it, and, saying, yes, I'll have time later. And my mind just was in a million things. And then I didn't honor what I had said I would do. Ding. Sometimes that can happen, little things. Lots of Mercury retrograde histories to tell you now, little stories. Oh my God. Like, I'm like, why is it so prominent for me right now? Miscommunications like galore. Like the times of appointments get shifted, get confused. I really have to ask the question 2 or 3 times. So this, but because of the experience I've been having like these days, and this keeps going this week, right? So it's not just last week, it keeps going. And I'm telling you, I kind of fell for all of it. Even when I make these videos and I tell myself all the things, then it's like I'm not following my own advice. So now I'm going to be more aware. So, first thing, make sure if you cannot commit to something, don't over promise. Don't say something if it's not really useful and if it's not something that you can really stand by, because this Jupiter Mercury can definitely have that effect where we have so much more in our heads. This is a magnifying glass, so much more in our minds than we can actually process. That could be one thing. That's why we may be overpromise, overshare, over everything, and then we're left with a little mess because we're not being precise and acute and again verifying the information, and not the right time to commit to things that you can't commit to. This is not the right time. Maybe this is the time to say, today, uh, I cannot promise anything to you right now. However, let me check and back with you at a later date. Is that okay with you? Simple, you know. And a good time also when you're communicating with people to reflect back what you hear. And again, it's because there could be so many misunderstanding and miscommunications because we're not really paying attention. Especially as Mercury will start retrograding into Virgo, it will start opposing Neptune again, and that's when the big fog, the big illusions, the big confusions can come again. So, time to be very precise, be very clear in your speech, and don't be afraid to ask the question twice. Double check. Say, let me reflect back to you what I heard. I heard you say this, this, this. Oh, yes, this is what I said. Oh, good. Are we on the same page? Yes, we are. Okay, this is our agreement. Good. you know, that way we avoid this mental confusion, this mental rush, or this um, psychic inflation, let's say. So, yeah, little things to consider there. Again, excellent time to really deep dive, deep, as Pluto is still illuminating the sun, and then it will, when Mercury retrogrades, it will go also back to Mercury, and Venus will be also involved. So this is a beautiful time to review uh our dynamics in relationships, even maybe things that are really not functioning, like that does not work. Also, where there is power dynamics, it's also a beautiful trine for, I mean, these um Pluto Venus, as it will come closer in the few coming weeks, for passion, for deep sexual encounters. Um, but on this note, because this will start more around maybe the end of the week, and I'm sensing something for people that are meeting people right now, new people, especially because of that Uranus Venus that can bring people into your life. Beware. Beware of doing your little homework, of um of seeing really what is there and not falling too fast for it, because there could be a lot of passion involved. Again, with Pluto Venus, there could be a lot of passion involved, and a lot of desire for things, passion, ah, and we might get caught up in a little bit too much in maybe an obsession that it's not necessarily unhealthy, but when you're just like so passionate about something and you just want to do that and you're obsessed with that. And um sexually could bring also some, there could be sexual innuendos as well, just because Neptune again will be opposing Venus. So all this climate makes it for that, like great time for experimenting with relationships, for letting go of relationships, for passionate encounters, and then make sure that this is not just an illusion. When Neptune is opposing Venus, and or this is also true for people who have planets again around these degrees, the 22nd degree of Gemini or Sagittarius, um, because there will be like these T squares occurring in your chart for all the mutable signs with the Venus Neptune aspect. What happens is that, let me see where, oh, here it is. I have all these pictures. This is what it looks like. You know, there's this idealization of something. It could be idealizing relationships, idealizing people, idealizing even worlds. It's also a a beautiful aspect in a sense because it connects us to something that is really more like a fantasy. And when there's fantasy, the best thing to do, you know what is to when you have fantasy is to write, especially having Mercury very close to Venus as well, retrograding. Write your stories, maybe write in your journal or make a love story. You know, it's the perfect time to maybe write some poetry. Um, Maybe go back in time. You know, this is also the time when lovers and ex-lovers can come back because Mercury is retrograding and is going to join with Venus and with Neptune. So also be careful because there could be this like grabbing back into relationships that were past, but maybe it is a time to cleanse them, clear them, and maybe move on from them. Maybe it's a time when you reconnect to an ex lover or an ex partner or an ex something, and you clear whatever was not cleared because of also Pluto being involved. Maybe this is a time to close chapters, tie loose ends, allow for that comeback to be that last comeback, you know, and go like, okay, this was this, and give it away or let it go or or even transform it. This could also be supportive for transforming a relationship that wasn't working into something different that can work. Sometimes this means being friends. Sometimes this means maybe revamping the love or getting passionate again. These are all possibilities under these aspects. So I don't know what it is for you, but let's see what happens. Um, because, yeah, going back to our Neptune, what happens with Neptune here is that it brings this feeling. You know, we're on cloud nine. There's a reality down there that we're really not seeing or not wanting to see because we are so obsessed with the idealization of love, of romance, again, sexual innuendos or things that are not really real, but we want so much to make it real, or we might want so much to make it work that it becomes this mirage. What happens when that dissipates? Well, maybe that city, and I'm just thinking, maybe that's this. Maybe that is the actual reality. I don't know. Maybe that's what's behind that fog. You know, maybe there's a lot of dysfunction to look at. And that's why Pluto is there too, to look at those things. Why are things not working? Why are we fighting? Again, Mars squaring Venus, that's still active, where there's just bickering for the sake of bickering, or could be potential disagreements. And if this is reality, but we're tainting this with this, then what happens is as these transits pass, there can be deep disappointments, disillusionments, because again, there could be promises that were not kept. And maybe it's like, yes, I promise this time around, you know, somebody comes back, a lover comes back from your past, you get together, and I'm just making a scenario that could be very well a scenario under this transit or these transits this week. I promise this time that I will do this and I will do this differently. And I promise you this and I promise you that and promise you. And then there's all this illusion. Then there's all this hope. Then there's all this, like, yes, connectedness. And then maybe we did not really see, like, okay, if you're promising this, can you make this commitment? You know, if you're saying these things, have you really changed and evolved? Or is it just a mirage or an illusion? And not only that, when it comes through a person outside of ourselves, that's because we might be projecting something that inside ourselves we are not looking at, which is usually the case with everything. Whatever is outside of ourselves is a projection of something inside of us to a certain degree. So, what are people in our lives that are coming, especially if it's lovers, people from the past? What are they bringing to this next layer of self that wants to transform, that wants to evolve into something different? How are these relationships wanting to be different and more freeing, more liberating? Because of that Uranus Venus, there is a deep desire, at least in the sky right now, there is this push for liberation in relationships. What does that look like? And I think this is a good time to make those agreements. Also, because we will be having the new moon. So, September 25th, Sunday, we have the new moon in Libra. And again, a Venus ruled sign, Libra. So, I'm feeling, sensing that relationships of all kinds are being very much highlighted. And when I said of all kinds, it's not just romantic. Sometimes it's partnerships in, you know, it could be business partnerships, it could be things you do with other people around you, and of course romantic relationships are also highlighted with these transits. um and not to mention that this full moon will this new moon will be opposing Jupiter. And again, it's that dynamic between self, you know, in Aries, like this is Jupiter in Aries, and all the things that I want to do for myself and how I could exist in this world, and in a position to, well, how I feel about others and how to relate to others. So I think this is a big kind of reset button for some kind of relationship issues. How do we relate to the world? How do we relate to others? Maybe this is a time for mending relationships or for experiencing something different. um, I have a little, like, also little anecdote that is very beautiful, and again, this is a little bit more universal, I would say, which for me personally, with Neptune having this on Venus, because not only on Venus, also on my Sun through these days, as a big transit, there is love is seen more as something more unconditional. And this is true in its highest octaves of expression. Unconditional love means exactly what it means. It's it's not expecting things to be the way they you want them to be. And I have been having these reflections ongoing for the past week, where I'm feeling really like, why do we have to be, for example, on time for something? Where does time come from? A clock. Somebody decided that by being locked into these systems of time, we had to comply, or if we said we would do something at this time, then we're gonna do this, and then we expect people to be there for what we have created as a structure of time. And again, this is the Saturnian pull, time. I keep thinking, what if for 1 week all of the people around me and myself could agree to just be fully, absolutely just present to the pushes and pulls of the present moment, of that intuitive guidance that says, now do this, now do that, now move here, now move there. And what would happen? What would the encounters be like? Sometimes we might miss out on something that we had said we would do, but maybe we don't feel like it at that particular moment. So, what would happen if we were more trusting of this universal flow that takes us around and 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 makes us do things out of an impulse more than a set intention in a future that doesn't exist? These are all my philosophical questions of these times, and I'm feeling this is because a lot of this Neptunian field is around me. With Neptune also, opposing this new moon with together with Mercury and Venus. Again, beautiful time for words, for poetry, for speaking, for allowing whatever is on the other side to be delivered beautifully around you, for kindness and gentle words. Again, be careful with too much charm, because what happens here, especially Venus, well, this little combo opposing also Jupiter and Neptune, is that that's when charm, the charmer comes up. The charm comes in, and charm sometimes is just charm. This is why, if this is you, make charm into an artwork, into an inspirational piece that can just draw people in to some magical experience of a fantasy that they know it's a fantasy. So make sure that you're making a distinction between reality and fantasy. That is very, very important under these transits, because then boom, 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 dun, 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 that's what can then be revealed, and you'll go like, oh, what happened? What was I thinking? Right? So be cautious. That's all I'm saying. um what else? Yeah, this is also a time with Neptune here where there could be many mirages or parallel realities. What is a parallel reality other than just the possibility in our minds to create something that we believe to be true? And again, with Jupiter, there is belief involved always. Belief and truth is part of the Jupiterian archetype. And belief and truth is what it is a belief. So make sure that what you believe in, it you're aware that that's a belief, and that belief and that belief in that reality you're creating, it's just that. And why not? We experience, if you ask me, I would say this is literally like a little bit of a holographic universe for sure, where all of what we think, and if we think it constantly, we will create those realities for sure eventually. So again, what realities are we creating, and what are we also believing? What realities are we being sucked into? If people are saying things, this is a time where there could be lots of different disparities in histories and stories and perspectives. And I don't know, some important thing in the world happens, and then there's like 10 different versions, and then there's conspiracy theories, and then there's this and there's that. It's just a multitude of layers that could be happening. So, what reality are you existing in? And does that reality suit you? That is probably the synthesis of what I wanted to say to you today. The reality you are creating, does it suit you? The relationships you are creating, do they suit you? Is this promoting a more sense of freedom, self expression, kindness, beauty, grace in the world? Awesome. Check. Otherwise, look at the darkness and what's not working. And I think this is where I'm going to leave you today. A lot of these inspirations and my personal stories, which I'm very vulnerably also sharing with you, because I definitely feel again this connection to the whole. Um, and with this being said, um, yes, this is what I feel like sharing today. There might be much more, but next week, I will be also talking about these things probably again. Please let me know how this new moon goes for you. This new moon in Libra, how you're experiencing those changes in your relationships, and um, what is going on in your world. I would love to know. Leave me some comments below, and I will see you next week with more. Feet on the ground, feet on the ground. Okay? Alrighty.